Hey there, it's Olivia Spanner here to give you a recent reads wrap up where I wrap up 10 books that I've recently read and tell you all of my thoughts on them. And I'm very excited for this recent reads because it is going to be a banger. I had a lot of 5-star favourites. I'll leave content warnings in the description box down below in case that's something you need. Without further ado, let's get into these 10 books that I recently read and all of my thoughts on them. So the very first book I want to mention is Loveless by Alice Oseman. I've been slowly reading my way through all of the Alice Oseman on my shelves and I gave this one 5 stars and it became a new favourite. Not because this book is imperfect, but just because of how much it made me feel. So this is an upper young adult novel about a girl who is going to uni for the first time. She's going with some of her friends, they're all going to the same uni, and as she's going to uni she slowly starts to discover that she may be aromantic ace, also sex averse, and I was a mess throughout this book because in this book she is slowly discovering who she is, but it also really digs in and delves into every facet of what that means for her. It's not just her trying to figure out maybe this is what my identity is, it's her contemplating about what that means for the future when all of her friends have romantic partners, what it means for the friendships in her life, what it means for her relationship with her family. And I really just appreciated how this is a book that's quite unique to me. I haven't really read a book about slowly discovering that you're ace before, and it's opened my eyes to how different that journey looks for this person within the queer community than it does for somebody else. And I really respect this book for going down the messy route. It's not just her who's figuring out her own identity, her friends are also going to uni for the first time and they are exploring and discovering stuff for themselves too. She's got a lesbian friend, she's also got this guy friend in the group, and their friendship group also expands. So basically what I want to say is that this book focuses a lot on friendships. It focuses a lot on friendships, both the old friendships but also blossoming new friendships, and what it can mean when you're navigating between that space of finding new friends but also wanting to maintain your old ones, which is what happens at university. And I appreciated that friendship was at the forefront of this book. Well, also the queer journey and self-discovery was at the forefront of this book, but friendship was really up there too. And there's just so many things that you see in romance books, you know, the third act breakup, it all swooping in and then a big romantic declaration, but just imagine all of that for friendship, and that's what you get in this book. I appreciated how much that was everything in this book. Not to say that there's no romance happening. When I say that she is messy on her journey to discovering who she is and what she is, I really just mean M-E-S-S-Y. Akwaeke Emezi's messiness, woo, it's that kind of level, and I respected that because these teenagers are really just like feeling around in the dark trying to figure out their way, and it was fun being on that journey with them, even though I sometimes wanted to scream as an adult reader. I still felt like all of their choices were very realistic and kind of what they would do, so I couldn't even say like you're making the wrong decisions as a teenager who doesn't have a full frontal lobe developed. I would have still made those same decisions, I think, if I would put into their shoes. Even though this is 400 plus pages long, you know me and my YA contemporaries, I do not believe, I staunchly disagree with the idea of them being 400 pages long. However, this one can have it, okay? This one can have it. It is a little bit slow paced, but I still really respected it. I looked into a lot of reviews of this because I did want to see what, you know, ace people themselves were saying about this book, and a lot of them did say that this was very great representation, and it makes sense because, you know, Alice Oseman is ace herself, so it is own voices in that respect. But there were quite a lot of reviews saying that the people of colour side characters just feel like token, mention their identity and that's it. And I want to say, as a person of colour reading this book, I absolutely strongly disagree with that sentiment. Yes, the people of colour don't, you know, have storylines that's all about them discovering their national identity or their like racial identity, but I don't think they need to discover it by the age that they are. And there are moments where her best friend talks about what it's like being, you know, Latin and lesbian, and how the lack of intersection, the lack of knowing Latin queer people, only knowing Latin people or queer people growing up, but not having someone who has that exact same crossover experience with her, has impacted her, and finding that at university is a groundbreaking moment for her. So I don't actually think it's ignored or overlooked. Alice Oseman herself is a white author, and for the way that she wrote the secondary characters as a white author, I think that's what I like to see. So I just want to give my own 2 cents on that. There's also mentions of the fact that there is a character who uses he they pronouns, and that character is unfortunately only ever referred to as he after we discover their pronouns. And that I do agree with. In terms of the representation in this book, we do get to see like a plethora of queer identities, but we don't get to see the trans experience. And for the one trans character that there is, you know, that non-binary element of them is kind of erased in the book. So I do think that is worth flagging and mentioning, but I still gave it 5 stars because, wow, what a journey I went on, all of the emotions that I felt, and how heartfelt and joyous this book managed to be, even though it was a messy experience for all of the teenagers involved. We are going to move right on to another 5-star read of mine, and that is Seek the Traitor's Son by Veronica Roth. So Veronica Roth was on my best books of 2025, and I've read another book of hers, and look and behold, I loved it. So this is like a fantasy, dystopian, sci-fi blend of genre. I love a good genre blend. And we are set in a world where there are 2 nations living in this world, and one of them are infected by the fever. They believe that the fever is the way, and when you're infected by the fever, you die. Everybody dies, but half of you will be resurrected in about 3 days time, and then that means you're infected with the fever. That's the way it's supposed to be, while the rest of the people die, and that's their own nation. And then you've got the people on Cedra, and they believe that the fever is terrible, that living that way is terrible, infecting all of your citizens and seeing who will survive. They think that's wrong, so they try to stay away from them. They form their own society, and they're uninfected by the fever. These 2 nations have been warring for years and years and years because the fevered people believe it's their duty to infect everybody. And so, while those 2 nations are warring against each other, there are 2 women who are leaders in their society, one of them in Cedra and one of them in the fevered society, and there is a prophecy that is made that one of these 2 women is going to win the war once and for all. However, the prophecy could apply to either of the women. They both receive the prophecy at the same time, and the questions that they ask and the choices that they make will determine whether the prophecy is about her or the other woman. That is the setup of the story. But let me tell you, this was so good. This was so good, and I think a lot of it has to do with how much I thoroughly enjoyed the world building. Oh my gosh, Veronica Roth knows how to create a whole world, how to create a society, how to create a language, and it be entirely separate from our world, but it feels so realistic. The history is there, the intricacies are there, and yet there is not a single info dump in this book. It is all fed to you throughout the line of the narrative. And I think what a lot of secondary world building misses is language world building. The fact that there will be different languages if you're talking about an entire planet. Often that is just overlooked. I think the Daevabad trilogy does that well, and this series does it well, even down to the way that Toulouse is set up. I really loved it. Then I can talk about the plot. The plot throughout this book is so good. So you start with the prophecy, and then immediately something happens that's like shock. Something happens as soon as the book starts that puts you on a fast pace, and I wouldn't even say that this book is fast paced. It's actually quite slow and steady, but the beats of the story that you reach, every single one moves that story forward. So it does feel like you're just going, the pace is perfect because it doesn't feel overly fast paced, but I still felt like I was savouring the world and savouring the connections and the characterization. So the pacing was immaculate, but the plot as well. There's something shocking in the beginning, then there's something shocking all the way through. It's entirely unpredictable, and as soon as you think you know where it's going to go, you do not. I loved the characters that we meet. There's a certain character that has crawled into my heart. I love me, a man who is very private, doesn't say much, but has a very unique power. So also the fever can sometimes grant different people powers when you come back to life, and this certain character has some very interesting powers, and I just loved how internal he was and how thoughtful and intentional he was with everything that he did. So I really liked him, and I really liked his secondary character. Now I won't say who this secondary character is, but so much love for him. Possibly book boyfriend material, I need to think about it, but definitely book boyfriend material. And I ship 2 characters together. They're not the main ship in this, but I ship those 2 characters together. I don't think it's ever going to happen, but because I fell in love with a secondary character, and because Veronica Roth knows how to kill her darlings, and we've all learned from reading the Divergent series, it meant that I was in peril the entire time that I was reading this book, because I was so worried that my favourite character was going to die at any moment, and there are several moments where characters can die in this book. So that was exciting. It all came together at the end, and it ended in a way that makes me want book 2 in my hands immediately. This is not even out until May. so it's going to be a jolly long wait, but it is so good. Love, love, love. I moved on to reading some poetry, so I read Poetry Annaw by Pennie. This was actually something I read 2 times. I read it physically and then I reread it by listening to it on audiobook. That is because Pennie is a spoken word poet. You can listen to her on TikTok and Instagram, and she writes in English and she writes in Scots, so some of these poems are in Scots, and I find the Scots quite hard to understand, but when I listen to it again via audio, you know, with Pennie speaking the Scots to me, I find it so much more easier to understand, which is why I read this in 2 different ways. This is a poetry collection that's a lot about misogyny. It's a lot about what it means to be a woman in present day society. It's fueled with anger, but it's also fueled with love, and so much love for women and what they do, and also just for the good that certain people do. Some of them touch on environmental issues. There's such a range to the scope of these poems, and I just really like them. Pennie has experienced a lot of trauma, as you can see from the poems, and they are woven in there, and I think it's a very like raw thing to be able to do, to get your poetry and your anger across in a way that feels believable and also just really effective. I love how Pennie works with language, and it's really fun to see the Scots in here. She makes it very easy for non-Scots speakers to understand as well, which I appreciate just by the words that she chooses, I think, and the way that she says them. And yeah, it's a very good poetry collection. There's poems, and then there's also Poyums Annaw, so this is the second collection of hers that I'm reading. What would one of my wrap-ups be if I didn't mention Freida McFadden? So I read another one of Freida McFadden's thrillers. This one is called One by One. It's about a group of friends who are mostly couples. They're 3 couples, and they go on a trip. They're going on a retreat. However, the car breaks down. They end up walking through the woods to try and get to this hotel, and they get terribly lost. And then one by one, they start to go missing. So it's about what is happening. I really enjoyed this. I had a lot of fun with this one. I think it's one of Freida McFadden's better thrillers. I've just read so many of hers that it's very easy for me to see where things are going and the storyline unfolding in front of my eyes. I can predict things because I know her style inside and out. And personally, I find that quite comforting. I had a lot of fun guessing who was the person causing it, and I would say that I was partially correct, which doesn't surprise me, but at the same time, I wasn't completely correct, which is nice to be surprised by it to some degree. Very easy to read, very much got a love triangle at its center. All of these people are despicable to each other in various ways. The motivations don't really add up for why this person is doing what they're doing, but aside from the motivations, I do think this is a really fun one to read. And if I did recommend Freida McFadden to anybody based on the ones that I've read, not The Housemaid, I haven't read that, I would actually recommend Never Lie and this one. These 2 seem to be my favourites. We have another poetry collection I read, which was Motherlands by Weijia Pan. Now this is a poetry collection about his ancestry, about his family who lived in Asia and their history and what they've experienced. And I don't really have much to say on this poetry collection because unfortunately I did not like it at all. This was the kind of poetry where it's a prose story, like a novella, but the poet has, you know, put indents and spaces into things and chopped up prose sentences and then been like, this is a poetry collection. I do think this would have been better served as like a short novel instead, because that's the way that it read to me. It did not read to me like poetry. I did not get the effect of any of the words chosen, of any of the emotions communicated. In fact, even though it's telling such a harrowing story of the family and what they went through, it was so dry. It was so dry and unemotional that I just couldn't connect. So even though I did find it was an interesting story, I just did not care while I was reading the book, unfortunately. So it was a very quick read, which is why I didn't do an effort. It's a short poetry collection, but it's still just not one that I particularly enjoyed. Now we are halfway through the books, which means it's time for me to thank my wonderful Patreons who support my channel. Thank you so much for doing so. And I also read The Fallen and the Kiss of Dusk by Carissa Broadbent in this time, and if you head over to my Patreon, there's a Patreon exclusive wrap up of The Fallen and the Kiss of Dusk. So I hope you head over and enjoy that. Now back to the rest of the books. For the first time this year, I completed and finished reading a series, and that's because I read Redemptor by Jordan Ifueko. This is the sequel to Raybearer, which I read last year. It's a young adult fantasy series, and I'll tell you about the first one. So in the first one, we're following a little girl who has a magical mother, and her mother curses her to murder the prince in this realm. The prince is indestructible once he has created his court of people, and his court is created of people who have special powers that can best serve the crown, his political court. He needs to form it as a child, and they can only join his court once they have fallen in love with him in some way. They have to love him like family or romantically for them to join his court. The people in his court are the only people who can kill him. He is immortal to everyone else and everything else. So the fact that the mother has cursed her to kill the prince means she has to go to his court, try and get into his court, fall in love with him, and in that moment she must then try and kill him. That's what the first book is about. I read this book and I really loved it. I do think this book is quite different from the other one in terms of what is happening, because the story escalates a lot in the first book, which obviously I cannot talk about, but I liked the plot in this. It's a far quieter plot, and because it is a quieter plot, I did find the first half of this book quite slow paced, but that's because the plot that it's tackling is something very different. The other one felt more like a fantasy plot. This one felt more like an allegory that was clearly talking about the fact that when you are trying to do good, when you are fighting for your rights, when you are fighting for other people's rights, and you're fighting to make the political situation in the world better and be an activist, that comes with a lot of tax. That comes with, you know, a feeling of you must do more, you must do more, you cannot rest until there is peace, you cannot be happy until there is peace, you must wallow in your guilt and your sadness that you are well off while other people are suffering, even though you're trying to alleviate that suffering by what you're doing. And I think this is a very important message for a lot of teenagers to have today who are activists, who are actively fighting for people's rights even though they're so young, that even though you are, you know, taking on that responsibility and wanting to help people, you've still got to find the time to rest, to relax, to remember you're allowed to be happy, and to enjoy the privileges that you have even though you're not forgetting the others. And I just thought I really respected the message that this was trying to bring across, and I respected that it wove it into the storyline so that it made sense for the fantasy world and what our main character was going through. Going back to this being a fantasy story, I do think it continued to expand on the world building that we have in the first book, and I just love the world that Jordan Ifueko has created because it is so creative. I think in this one, in Seek the Traitor's Son, I've really experienced the creativity that people can have in giving people powers, and that I really liked that, and I really liked how it expanded that. There's such a keen sense of found family in this, and the found family goes to another level in this particular book, and it does go to some like really dark, serious places. I enjoyed the romantic sub-storyline that we get. We've got a lot of black characters in this because it is based on like African mythology, but we also have, you know, a secondary ace character who's having his own storyline, and just other depictions of the characters going on their own individual journeys, which weave into hers, but also are individual to them. And I really like that. All in all, I think this was a splendid series. I really enjoyed both books. There is a spin-off novel, and I will be reading that as well. Oh, I had such a good reading month. I can't wait to tell you about Cursed Daughters by Oyinkan Braithwaite. I gave this book 5 stars. It became a new favourite and I absolutely loved it. This is the same author as My Sister the Serial Killer, but it is a very different book. We're following 3 generations of black women who are living in Nigeria, and they have been cursed. Their ancestors have been cursed, and the curse is that none of them will find happiness or peace with the men that they love in their lives. And so we as readers are following this big question of whether the curse is real and something supernatural is stopping these women from finding happiness in love, or whether it's generational trauma that is impacting these women and therefore they're not finding happiness in love because they are following and mimicking the behaviours of their parents, which are running down the line. Simultaneously, this book starts with a very serious situation where somebody decides to walk into water and give up their lives, and you piece together why and how that happened as we go back in the timeline and we switch between women at the 3 different generations. This was absolutely fantastic. For a literary fiction book, Oyinkan Braithwaite, who's written a literary thriller, knows how to write. She knows how to write very short, punchy chapters that are to the point, that get you to where you need to go by the end of the chapter, but keep you turning those pages, and I couldn't stop reading this one. I loved how steeped in Yoruba culture this is in particular. It's got a lot of the superstitions, especially ones that I didn't even recognize as somebody who's not of that culture myself, but it does, you know, briefly touch on tribalism and also like the superstitions and the beliefs and whether that affects these women in their lives and whether the curse is real. That all feeds into a reoccurring theme. This is a family saga in a way that I haven't read it before. Often I read family sagas and you start with one generation and you go to the next generation and the next, and I'm not usually a big fan of that because I feel like I get attached to characters and then they're gone, you know? But with this one, following the 3 generations, but it's jumping all over the timeline in a way that makes it very clear who is who. So I was never confused, but it just meant I more so emphasized with all these women because I was in their heads in the moments that it was important to be in their head, in the moment where the situation would affect them the most, whether that meant they were older for it or younger for it happening. And it made me sympathize with them all. I could understand where all of them were coming from, even though I don't always think they made the right choices. I could just completely understand why they would make those choices. They felt like real women to me, like they would come and leap off the page. And so a lot of this is about, you know, love and romance, but it's also about family ties, family relationships. What does love even look like? What does love even mean? What does it mean to love yourself, you know? And also a lot about the pressures of Black culture. These women are almost treated as if they aren't worth anything because they haven't found a man, because they are not having children. That is a big element to this book as well. And so I really liked that Oyinkan Braithwaite is taking these big topics and discussing them by showing us and weaving it into their story. This book is show over tell all over it, and it's just done so incredibly well. If you are going to be reading one literary fiction book, this is the one that I'm going to be steering you towards. This is a long recent read because I feel like I have so much to say about the books that I recently read. So I also read Arcadia by Tom Stoppard. This is a play, and it's a play, just read this yesterday. This is a play about 2 time periods. One is the past and one is the future. And in the one in the past, we see what has really happened. We see about the romantic drama and entanglements that these people end up in. And then in the future, we see these historians who are poring over the letters and the notes and the paperwork and evidence that is left from the past and trying to figure out what actually happened. And you are flicking between these 2 timelines. This was an incredibly cleverly well done play. So Tom Stoppard has these characters in the past talking about what is happening romantic entanglement drama wise, but kind of talking around the subject and doing other things while talking about a particular thing. So you have to pay attention to get the core root of the conversation that's happening, while simultaneously you've got a really interesting present day storyline about whether we can truly know what has happened in the past or not, whether we're making it all up, because the best we're doing is guessing based on the insubstantial evidence that we have. And so we have characters going against each other and guessing certain things happened or didn't happen, and then we'll be pulled back into the past and we can see who's right, but that doesn't necessarily show the future people if they were right or not. And I just found it so fascinating because I just truly wanted to know who was guessing correctly, who was the right one, who had the correct answer of what was happening in the past. And Tom Stoppard very cleverly didn't reveal things to us into the past until people in the future had tried to guess what had happened. So that meant there was an element of suspense throughout the play as we were trying to figure out fact from false. It came together really well at the ending, and I can't really give away the ending, but the way that the playwright worked with the 2 storylines on stage is very interesting, and I really liked visually how that turned out. When I say how it turned out visually, it's because of course you've got stage directions within the play, so you can see how the playwright wants it to be seen. Fascinating. This was really, really good. I don't actually have anything bad to say about this other than the fact you need your brain switched on while you're reading it. Then I have here One Leg on Earth by Pennie Aguda. This is a literary fiction book about women in Lagos, and all of them are stepping into water and choosing to no longer live on this earth. And it's about why there's a phenomenon of all of these pregnant women collectively making this choice in Nigeria at the same time. And we follow a young woman who has moved to Lagos, and she's trying to do well in her job, which is setting up a new area for residents to live. And she discovers that she is pregnant herself. So of course this is coming with a lot of fear about the fact that this phenomenon is happening and whether it's going to catch and be infected by her and she's going to feel the same way. But at the same time, this book is talking about so much more. I would say one of the primary things that it's actually touching on is loneliness. These women are feeling lonely, and almost all of them are pregnant, so lots of them have partners, they're feeling lonely. Lots of them have friends, they're feeling lonely. And I think it's a big topic at the moment, feeling this sense of acute loneliness while living in a bustling capital city. Like, how can that be happening? It's happening here in London all the time. And so I really appreciated that we got a book that really looked at that examined that picked up the pebbles and stared at them and stared it down and is asking, why is this happening? At the same time, there's also another very separate storyline, which is about colonization. It's about land, who owns the land, who was there before, and who has a right to build on it, and for who will be living there. A lot of that touches on themes of gentrification, but especially in Nigeria, it has a lot to do with, native peoples, and that is woven into this story quite smoothly as well. So I really enjoyed the themes that we are discussing. Actually, my favorite thing about this book is the writing style. Pennie Aguda, this is the first book of hers that I'm reading, but she has written a short story collection before, and it shows. It shows because the writing in this is lyrical and beautiful. It is gorgeous, gorgeous writing. It's the writing that I see in a very good short story collection, but stretched over the entirety of this short novel, and I loved it for that. I loved how beautiful this was to read. The only thing that I have with this book is that I wish the ending gave me a few more answers. It's not an unsatisfying ending by any means, but I just wanted solid answers for certain things. That's all I can say. I'll have content warnings specifically for all of these books, but specifically for this one down below, if you're pregnant, thinking about childbirth, please check out those content warnings before you go in. The last book I'm going to mention in this wrap up is a picture book, and I gave this picture book 5 stars and I absolutely adored it. This is I Talk Like a River by Jordan Scott and illustrated by Sydney Smith. This is a picture book about a boy with a stutter, and he goes to school and he's supposed to be presenting and he has a bad speech day. And so his dad pulls him out of school and takes him to the forest so they can have some peace and quiet, and it's about what he discovers when he's having that peace and quiet time with his dad and how it changes his perception on his own speech. Now, this is a really, really beautiful story, its own voices. At the back there's an author's note where the author is talking about his own experience living with a stutter, and I just think, as I always say, disabled rep is so important, or just representation of people different from us, and I really like that it's kind of normalizing that people can have stutters for children before they might encounter someone with one, so they can better react and better know what is happening. I really love the language in here. I really loved the message about nature and how that environment helps him a lot. I loved seeing a nice dad-son relationship in this book, and I just loved the overall message entirely. As well as that, the artwork in this was really, really beautiful. You can see from the cover how gorgeous it is, but also just on the inside, it's really nice. And there's one thing about picture books that I don't actually see many picture book artists doing often, is changing the style of the artistry to match the mood of what that page is given. So I think even in the examples I showed you, those two styles were not the same, and I really liked how that contributed to the mood and the storyline. The fact that maybe the paintings were a bit more blurred and the imagery was a bit more blurred when the character was feeling stressed, and then when he's in nature and he's looking at the river flowing, it's more focused and more longer breaths, like longer artistry strokes, and just the fine-tuned detail of the artwork is really, really amazing. And so I really loved the artwork in this, as well as the story too, which obviously that's 5 stars because that's everything about a picture book, and I loved it all. So there you have it. That is the 10 books I recently read and all of my thoughts on them. Please let me know in the comment section down below, what was the last book you recently read and what did you think of it? Are there any books in this wrap up that you have read as well or that you want to read? Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!